Hi, I'm Ahmed Matiana, the Chief Operating Officer at Alethea AI. Alethea is a research and
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about sleuthkit, and this is going to be a general introduction into some of sleuthkit's tools. So I am currently running on a Linux computer, running Ubuntu, but most of the commands will also work if you're using sleuthkit on Windows. They'll just be slightly different, the way that you access different files and things like that. So most of these commands should work on Windows or Linux. If you have sleuthkit installed, just be aware that there is a little bit of a difference between the way the paths are written. Okay, so first, I already have sleuthkit installed. If you're on Ubuntu, you can install it from the package manager. If you're on Windows, you can download the Windows executables from the sleuthkit website. And I know that it's installed because I can type, for example, one of the sleuthkit tools called MMLS. And if we do MMLS -V, okay, -V, then we can see what version of the sleuthkit tools that we have installed. And I'm currently using version 4.3.1, and that's the most recent version as of today. If you're using a version that's quite different than that, I recommend upgrading and basically try to keep your tools updated as much as possible. But if you're using some of them from the package manager in Ubuntu, they will be a little bit older. So maybe just compile them yourself if you know how to do that. If not, package manager tools will still work fine. You just might be missing some features. Okay. So first, from the command line, make sure you can actually run your tools. So here I ran the command MMLS and then -V, and that gives me the expected output. So at least I know my tools are working. I'll tell you a little bit about my setup. I'm currently inside my images folder, an image folder, and if I do ls, if I type ls, then I can see all of the files inside that directory. Okay, so ls shows me the files inside that directory, and I see that I have this 4GB USB.dd and 4G USB .info, and if we want to see what's inside, well, technically both of these, but if I want to see what's inside this info file, then I can do cat, C-A-T, which is used for concatenation, but it can also output whatever is in the file to the screen. So we can do cat 4GB USB info, okay, and then that will list basically all of the text inside of this info file. And this is just created, an image was created using Geimager, and it just has information about a little bit about the system that created it, some of the commands that created it, information about the device itself, and then the hash value. So again, the hash value is going to be one of the most important values. So here we have this hash value, D0, D8, ending with 5EFD. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do, I'm going to clear this. The first thing we want to do before we start working with this image is hash the image. And it was an MD5 hash, so I can use MD5 sum on this 4GB USB DD. Okay. And MD5 sum will then calculate the hash value of this 4GB disk, and it should be the same value that was registered inside this 4GB USB.info. And here we have this 5E FD. So we know that this image and whatever was created, at least in this image, the info file, are the same image. So now we have a good starting point. We know that the hash value at least matched from the recorded hash value, assuming the recorded hash value is correct. Okay, so so far we've looked into this info file to get information about the image. And then we created a hash of our disk image using MD5 sum. Okay, so that's all we've done so far. We haven't actually used sleuthkit tools to do anything except look at the version of the sleuthkit tools that are installed on this system. So the first thing I'm going to do, I have this image, and let's say I don't know anything about this image, so I need to start by gaining a little bit more information about what is going on with this image. So I can do img STAT, and this is a tool that's also part of the sleuth kit. It's image stat, and basically for image stat, you just give it the image directly. Okay. Now, my image is a raw disk image. It's a DD image, right? So we have a raw disk image. If this was an E01 file or another type of disk image, then some of these tools might not work as expected. So the first thing to make sure of is that you're actually working with a raw disk image, or you have like libewf installed, so that way you can work with expert witness format images. Okay, so image stat, img stat, and then the image name, press enter, and then we see that image type is raw, and it gives the size in bytes. Okay, so relatively small image. We know that we're dealing with a raw disk image, and even though it says DD, we would expect a raw disk image, but this just confirms that it looks like, at least, that it's a raw disk image. Okay, so now that I know that I'm dealing with a raw disk image, we can run mmls and the disk image name, and this gives us information about the disk itself. Okay, so it has a DOS partition table. The offset sector is 0. Units are in 512 byte sectors, and this is going to be important for some of the analysis we might do later. Okay, now each of these entries are basically either the partition table, unallocated space, or partitions themselves. Okay, so now we can actually see the layout of the physical disk. So this basically tells me mmls, and this for mmls and the image name tells me the layout of the actual disk. Okay, now this is very important because now I know the start point of the partition that I'm interested in analyzing. Okay, so here we have basically 3 entries. Now there could potentially be something. Actually, no, the unallocated space length is. There could be something potentially in this unallocated space, maybe. Not a lot of space really to work with. Primary table. So I might be interested in analyzing these two a little bit, but this Windows 95 FAT32 looks like the only real partition on the disk. So I know that this 4 gigabyte USB disk is a raw disk image, and I also know that it is a physical disk image, and it's not a logical disk image. If it was a logical disk image, mmls would give us an error because it wouldn't be able to basically parse out the partition table. So in this case, be aware of the difference between a physical disk image and a logical disk image. If it's a physical disk image, you will most likely get some sort of output like this. If it's a logical disk image, then you're just basically have an image of only this part, and you'll get an error whenever you give that image to mmls. So make sure you're aware of whether your disk image is a raw disk image or some other format, and also make sure you know whether your image is a physical disk image or a logical disk image. What are we actually analyzing here? Okay, so mine's a physical disk image because I can see that it's the entire disk. And I want to focus in on this partition, so this Windows 95 FAT32 partition, and the offset, the place where this partition begins, is 11264. Okay, so I want to focus in on this partition specifically and start to analyze or get information out of this partition. Okay, so the next thing we can do after mmls, and we know the offset of the partition we want to look at, is use fsstat-o. Okay, fsstat-o, and that -o gives me, with -o, I should give it an offset of 11264. Okay, and that means that basically we're trying to get the file system information from a partition that starts at this particular offset. Well, there's only one partition that starts at that offset, and it's this one. What is the file system installed on that partition? Well, it's recognized as FAT32, at least. We're not sure if it is FAT32 yet, but it's recognized as FAT32. Okay, so fstat-o, and then the offset of the partition, starting offset of the partition that we want to analyze, and the name of the disk that we want to analyze. Okay, so fstat, and then it gives us a lot of information. Let's scroll back up. Okay, so what can we find here? File system information for this partition. OEM name MS-DOS5. Okay, it's looking like it's most likely FAT32. Okay, volume ID. No name for the partition. File system type label FAT32. Next free sector. Okay, so more sector information. File system layout. Total range. FAT1, FAT2. Where are they located at? Yeah, so basically just information about the file system itself, everything that we can see, okay? Yeah, so FAT contents, etc. Okay, so that gives us information about the file system, and the fact that we could actually get that information means that there is, well, it looks like a valid file system there. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. So next we want to look into basically the directories in the file system. Once we know that there's a file system there, we're interested in the files themselves. So I can do fls-o, and I forget the offset. I'll just do fls-o. So fls-o, and then the offset of the partition that I'm interested in, and the disk image. And then that will give us information about directories. Here we have directories and regular files inside that partition. Okay, so here we have directories, regular files in that partition, and this has been used quite a bit to do a lot of different things. One thing that you might notice already, we have these CR downloads, which is like a Chrome download. So basically an image, this image most likely, or one of these images, was most likely downloaded into this USB stick or this drive, and then the CR download was deleted whenever it was renamed. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking for anything else. We have a couple other deleted files. Yeah, a couple deleted directories. So I have this directory here, apparently called paste, but with this underscore, which means that most likely it was deleted as well. So I'm going to go and let's say we want to look into this. It's inode 112. Okay, so fls-o11264 lists all of the files in the root directory. So fls is listing files, and basically because we didn't give it any other commands, we're just listing in the root directory of that partition on that disk image. So from the disk image, we found the partition offset. Inside the partition, we're listing only the root directory. We can go through recursively listing all of the files, but so far we're only listing root directory. Okay, so now I'm going to go into, we're going to look, for example, at, let's say this WinMD5 sum portable. I want to see if there's any files inside of this folder. I know it's a directory because this DD. We have the inode of 25. So let's go ahead and try to get in there. So we can just type FLS, give it the offset of the partition that you want to look at on the physical disk, the physical disk image, and then the inode of the folder that you want to look into. And in our case, it's 25. So I can hit enter, and then this gives me a couple files, regular files, and a couple more folders. So I can use this basically to go through and look at different files and folders just directly using sleuthkit as a parser. In later videos, we'll go through about how to actually extract this data once we identify files or folders that we're interested in, how we can use sleuthkit to extract this data. So I hope that was helpful for at least getting started. The biggest thing to think about is first off, you need to get information about the image with image stat, img stat, and then the disk image that you're going to analyze. So first we're going to get information about the disk image to make sure it's the right type, basically. Then we want to use mmls to get the layout of the disk image, right? So we can actually see if it's a physical disk or if it's a logical disk. If it's a physical disk, we know that we're going to have to use offsets. If it's a logical disk, you do not have to give the offset. So in our case, we have a physical disk image. So we need to get the offset of the partition that we want to actually analyze, which in our case is 11264. Okay, and then you can use fsstat and the offset 11264 with the disk image name 4GB USB DD. Okay, so in this case we can get the file system information from the partition at offset 11264. And if there's multiple partitions in here, I can give the starting offset for multiple partitions in different commands to find out what file systems are installed. Okay, and then FLS lists the files within a given partition by default just in the root directory, but you can list, for example, recursively, you can list deleted files, you can do a lot of different listings there. 1124, and then you have to give it the disk image name, right? And then that gives me a list of all of the files. And then if I want to look into any particular file or folder, I need to give the inode address of the actual folder or potentially the file that I'm interested in. So we'll use the inode address for the files later to extract the data. Okay, so that's pretty much it for starting. If you are stuck on any of the commands, so for example, MMLS, if you don't know how to use MMLS, you can just type MMLS or any of the commands without any arguments, and it will give you a help menu. And this help menu is extremely helpful, really. Learn how to use help menus, especially in basically most programs in Linux, but especially for the sleuthkit. It will tell you a lot of different things. So let's just for now do the help menu for FLS. Okay, I'm going to clear this, FLS. Let's just go through this. So first, FLS is the command, okay, and then everything in brackets is basically not required. These are options that you can give the program. Just everything in brackets is recommended, and then we see that this image is not in brackets, and it is required. Okay, so here, anything not in brackets you have to have. Everything else is potentially optional. Now, if you give, for example, FLS and just the image name 4GB USB DD, then we're going to get an error that says cannot determine file system type. Okay, the reason for that is we have a physical disk image. Okay, and because it's a physical disk image, it doesn't know where the file system actually starts and ends. Okay, so in this case, cannot determine file system type because we have to give it the actual offset here. So if you're getting the cannot determine file system type error, give it an offset of, I don't remember exactly what it was, 11 something something. Okay, so you need to give it at least the offset of where the partition begins if you have a physical disk image. If you have a logical disk image, you do not have to. Okay, so if inode is not given, a root directory is used. So in our first commands, we didn't use an inode, and the inode goes at the end of the command. We didn't use an inode, so the root directory was used or listed. In this case, -a, display dot and dot entries. These are basically the current directory and prior directory entries. Some people list that just so they kind of know where they are. I mean, there's a couple different uses for that, but you don't need to list them. -d, display deleted entries only. So maybe you only want to display deleted files and folders. You can use -d. Display only directories with uppercase D. Display only files with -f. Display long version with -l. Basically displays the more file path information. -i image type. So some image types cannot be determined, so you can give it -i and then say the image type that you want to use, whether it's raw or some other image type, and you can use -i list for supported type. So for example, we can use FLS -i list, and it supports, at least in my version, raw image types, either single or split, AFF, AFD, AFM, AFFlib, and EWF. Okay, so those are all the file types that my version of sleuthkit is supporting because I have different libraries installed. Okay. -M, display the output in MacTime input format with dir as the actual mount point of the image. MacTime format is what a lot of other tools use. So if you want to export the output of FLS and then put them into another tool, they're usually asking you for MacTime output, and we'll talk about that later. -O is the image offset, and we've already used that, the offset in the image file in sectors. So we really need to know the image offsets to be able to analyze the data. -P displays the full path for each file. Again, path. -R recurse on all the directory entries or list every file and directory in the disk image. -U display undeleted entries only. Okay, undeleted entries. -V file in sectors. MacTime formats, at least in my version, raw image types, either time input form or another tool. -P displays the full path for each file. Again, path. -R recurse on all the directory entries or list every file and directory in the disk image. -U display undeleted entries only. Okay, undeleted entries. -V verbose output. -V. We can find out where we need to put -R up here. So it should be FLS dash and then whatever your options are. So I need to put -R before -O. Okay. So FLS -R-O give the offset number. So -O is expecting something afterwards, but -R is not. And then we give the disk image. And then I don't need this inode because I'm going to list all of the files. So if I hit enter, then it should list very quickly because there wasn't a lot. There's not a lot of files inside this, but you see that we're actually going into each folder and then listing all of the files and folders in each folder. So this gives us a recursive list of all of the files and folders for the entire disk. So that's it for Introduction to sleuthkit. I hope the commands make sense, or at least you're able to access the help menus.